Long before the first fishermen built their huts along the Haitian coastline, legends spoke of an otherworldly presence stirring the waters at dusk. By the time the sun dipped into the sea, women balanced pots on their heads as they returned from collecting conch shells along the shore, humming tunes that spoke of mothers, daughters, and spirits. Whispers passed among the villagers. A mermaid spirit who dwelled in coral temples beneath the waves controlled the storms and the cycles of the sea. Yet these tall tales were only bedtime stories for most curiosities, repeated by candlelight to lull children to sleep with thrilling visions of a shining tail flashing under the moon. There was one elder in the village who insisted the tales were real. He was called Augustin, a man with wrinkled skin and eyes that had witnessed more storms than anyone else in the region. In the gathering shadows of evening, he liked to sit on a bench near the pebbled beach and speak in a voice worn by decades of salt air. He claimed that in his youth he had spotted a swirl of aqua and silver gliding among the coral. She had a regal aura and a crown of sea glass beads woven through her hair. Although Augustine's stories were colourful and enthralling, few believed him. Most villagers chalked up his accounts to the overactive imagination of an aging man who missed the golden rigours of his youth. But as hurricane season approached, people grew uneasy. The winds began to shift unpredictably and the glassy waters turned choppy without warning. One night, a particularly fierce squall arose suddenly, thrashing the coconut palms so violently that entire fronds were flung into the surf. Claudette, a mother of 3, reported seeing glowing eyes in the dark foam, large and bright enough to pierce the turmoil. Others heard what seemed to be a melodic chanting just before lightning illuminated the sky. Rumours soon resurrected Augustine's story with new urgency. What if the mermaid's wrath was real? What if her domain beneath the coral was far more than a romantic fable? The young fisherman, Jean, whose livelihood depended on calm seas, listened carefully to these stories. Growing up, he had seen his share of storms, but nothing like the erratic weather patterns looming now. Jean spent days hauling in smaller and smaller catches, as if the fish themselves had fled deeper waters to escape something no one else could see. When he mended his nets on the beach, he thought he could sense an unsettled presence in the breeze. He had never paid much heed to superstition, usually more concerned with how to feed his family and keep his aging boat afloat. Yet a sinking feeling told him that Augustine's warnings might hold a thread of truth. One evening, Jean found Augustine alone by the water's edge, gazing out toward the horizon where heavy clouds stacked up like mountains. Approaching quietly, Jean sensed the old man was waiting for something, or someone. A hush had fallen over the sea, an almost unnatural stillness before the storm's fury. Jean sat down on a broken piece of driftwood, the briny air stinging his nostrils, and asked, did Augustine truly believe a mermaid spirit was behind these storms? And if so, why would she cause them? Augustine's answer was deliberate, paced by the rhythmic sound of waves slapping the shore. He spoke of a pact once forged between the land dwellers and this sea guardian known as La Reine de Corail, the Coral Queen. Long ago, the village had thrived by showing respect to the sea. Fishermen sprinkled offerings into the tide. Mothers swept the sand free of debris. Children were taught to treasure even broken shells. In return, the Coral Queen harnessed her hurricanes to protect the coast from invaders and purge the waters of evil. But over generations, the pact was forgotten. The people grew careless. Overflowing nets banqueted greed rather than necessity, and polluting wastes sullied the seabed. Angered by this neglect, the Coral Queen signalled her displeasure through storms that grew more ferocious with each passing year. That evening, Jean returned home restless, turning the story over in his mind. Huddled beside a table lit by an oil lamp, he dipped bread into a bowl of pumpkin soup, feeling the inexorable call of the waves. He glanced at his wife, Elise, who sat across from him, her eyes brimming with worry. Their children slept in a corner, lulled by the pounding rain on the tin roof. As thunder rumbled, Jean confessed his plan to seek out the Coral Queen's underwater domain. Elisa's eyes widened, but she did not try to dissuade him. There was a new hurricane forming, an even darker swirl of storms that threatened to devastate the coast. If a direct confrontation with the mermaid spirit was the only way to protect their home, so be it. The next morning arrived with an ominous hush. Clouds still hung thick, but the wind had dropped, leaving the sea a strangely calm, pewter hue. Jean prepared his small boat. He patched holes, double-checked the nets, and mixed the last of his salt rations into a cloth bag for offerings. Villagers gathered along the wooden pier, whispering in low voices, many crossing themselves as he climbed aboard. Even cynics who dismissed the legend looked unsettled. Augustin came to bid him farewell with a firm handshake and pressed something into Jean's palm, a small carving of a mermaid made from driftwood. "Remember," the old man murmured, "she is not merely hungry for destruction, but begs for respect. Give her what was once given." Jean pushed off into waters that seemed deceptively still. In the distance, a mass of charcoal-colored clouds loomed, an uneasy quiet spreading over the foam-kissed waves. The horizon darkened, and Jean could feel tension coil in the air, as though some entity was watching from beneath. He sailed farther than ever before, scanning the surface for any sign, a ripple, a flash, or a swirl of color in the gloom. Hours passed. The sun dimmed behind bulwarks of storm clouds until day melted into a subdued twilight. His arms trembled from gripping the boat's rudder, instinct screaming that a monstrous squall was about to erupt. Just as he considered turning back, a silent wave rocked his vessel from below, nearly capsizing it. Jean gasped and clung to the side, peering overboard. What he saw next flashed through his mind in a staccato of disbelief. A powerful tail, gilded with patterns of coral, pink, and turquoise, disappeared in the depths. In the same moment, columns of lightning jagged through the sky, the thunder resonating close enough to rattle his ribs. The wind soared to a shriek, needles of rain slicing down. Trapped in the fury of the storm, Jean wrestled with the ropes, but water soon flooded over the gunwale. A wave battered the boat sideways, tossing him into the sea. He plunged into a swirl of salt water, disoriented by the darkness. The undercurrent sucked him deeper, snatching the air from his lungs, as if giant, unseen hands dragged him down. His vision wavered with each frantic pulse of his heart. Then, in the murk, he sensed a presence guiding him. A shimmer of luminous scales pressed against his shoulder, gently guiding him away from an underwater whirlpool. As the choking panic abated, Jean felt himself pulled into an open cavity among the reefs, coral branches forming archways adorned with crustaceans and shimmering anemones. Within this watery cathedral glowed the subdued illumination of sea life, painting everything in hues of phosphorescent green and violet. Slowly, he realized he was breathing not air, but water that seemed blessed with oxygen. As though a bubble of magic enveloped the labyrinthine palace, he blinked in disbelief when he saw her. The Coral Queen's human torso was draped in strands of pearls and seaweed, her hair an opulent fan of black curls twined with shells. Her eyes were a fierce swirl of turquoise, layered with ancient sorrow and an unwavering sense of authority. A single wave of her hand stilled the pounding in Jean's chest, as if commanding him to relax. He realized he stood in the fabled underwater temple, which Augustine had insisted existed. Coral columns rose from the sea floor, etched with glyphs that resembled Haitian veves sigils to the spirits. Schools of fish spun overhead, weaving in and out of the lace-like reef structures. The currents vibrated with a silent litany of warning, as though the ocean itself poised for a confrontation. The Coral Queen spoke without moving her lips, a telepathic voice reverberating through Jean's mind. "You came seeking the source of the storm. Perhaps you have come to restore the old respect the land once gave the sea, or to fight me as your people once tried. Which is it, fisherman?" Though his body floated, Jean felt a gravity in her presence. He tried to recall Augustine's words, that the spirit was not cruel without reason. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the mermaid carving the old man had given him. Slowly, tentatively, he raised it, letting it drift toward her outstretched hand. The coral queen eyed the simple wooden figure with a blend of curiosity and sorrow. Jean sensed that it triggered forgotten memories of worship, reverence, and offerings that had ceased long ago. "You see," Jean's voice wavered through the watery hush. "This was carved by a man who still believes. We are not all lost to greed and neglect. Some of us remember. We are ready to renew the pact." The telepathic hum from the Queen's presence swelled, and the swirling fish parted, revealing a corridor of reef in the temple floor. At the end of that passage, silhouettes of weathered altars held jade bowls and tarnished coins, symbols of tributes from centuries past. Moss had claimed them in silence, and only the echo of the ocean's memory remained. The mermaid spirit glided forward, her gaze softening like morning light filtering through water. "Your ancestors promised to keep the seas clean and harvest only what they needed. In return, I guarded the coast with my storms, ensuring foreign raiders could not approach. The hurricanes you fear once served as a shield, a violent wave against those who plundered. But when your people forgot, when they turned the gifts of the sea into profit, dumping refuse into these waters, they drew my ire. I am the keeper of balance, fisherman, not a vengeful monster. Yet, floods and tempests are my voice when all else fails." Jean felt an undercurrent of guilt. He thought of the plastic bottles and fishing lines that littered the beach, the pirates and corrupt traders trafficking cargo through nearby coves, the unscrupulous men who dynamited coral reefs for a quick bounty of fish, leaving ruin behind. "I cannot fix what is already broken," he whispered, "but I can bring your voice to those who will listen. May we not find another way besides storms and suffering? There are children in the village who deserve to see the ocean as a friend, not an enemy. Let me help you restore what was lost." She extended her webbed fingers, resting them gently on Jean's shoulder. A deep vibration pulsed through his body, an oceanic heartbeat that seemed to course with the ancient pulse of the tides. Instantly, images flooded his mind, the first settlers making offerings of shells and fish to the mermaid's altar, the lapping waves turning silver under a full moon as she permitted safe passage to traveling ships, a time when storms were rare but rose swiftly to fend off predators. Then came darker visions, the reefs turning grey with pollution, creatures fleeing the shallows, fevers of sickness drifting inland whenever the water turned foul. The Queen's heartbreak was as vast as the sea. "Summon your elders," she intoned in his mind. "Revive the old rites in truth, not superstition. Protect the corals, tend the beaches. When you show real change, I shall quell the storms. If you fail, I will preserve the sea by whatever means I must." Her shimmering tail curled around a pedestal, and she thrust a conch shell into Jean's hands. Its surface was etched with swirling symbols reminiscent of Haitian sigils. "Blow this at dawn under the open sky as a pledge to restore the balance." The swirling currents became unstable, the watery cathedral fading as if pulled away by an invisible tide. Jean felt the bubble of breathable water thinning, and a rush of ocean pressure battered him. The next moment, he surfaced gasping for air near a shattered plank of his boat. The storm had died to a light rain, the seas rolling gently as the edges of the hurricane receded. Dazed, he clung to what remained of his vessel until he managed to drift ashore. By dawn, the villagers found him half-conscious near the reef-strewn beach, a conch shell clutched in his arms. They carried him to Augustine's hut, where he rested on a worn cot. Word spread like wildfire that Jean had found the mermaid spirit, survived the storm, and returned with a shell marked by ancient symbols. Curious onlookers packed the small space, listening in rapt silence to his testimony. Some disbelieved, pointing to sheer luck. Others hesitated, drawn by the gravity of his story. Wind hissed outside, stirring battered palm fronds, reminding them that the next hurricane might be only a day away. That night, Augustin convinced the village council to gather for an emergency meeting. Although they once brushed off spiritual matters as antiquated folklore, the pounding storms had forced even skeptics to reconsider. Jean, still weak but resolute, addressed them. "The Coral Queen is not our enemy. She's the guardian of our coast, but we have forced her to harm us by trampling the pact of respect we once had. We must show her that we can be better custodians of the sea." Murmurs spread through the crowd. A member of the council, a pragmatic older woman named Rosaline, challenged him sharply. "And if she does not believe us, fishermen? What if she decides to unleash a storm that washes this village away?" Jean raised the conch shell. "She asks only for proof of our sincerity. We must begin at once, cleaning the beaches, restoring the reefs. If we do this, the storms will recede." Deciding that inaction was far more dangerous, the villagers made plans. Early the next morning, the community organized a massive sweep of the shore. Men and women in tattered clothes filled wooden carts with garbage and debris, hauling it inland for proper disposal. Children who had once seen the beaches as playgrounds now gathered coral fragments carefully, collecting them in baskets to be replanted in shallower waters where they might revive. Local craftsmen repaired fishing nets and pledged to fish responsibly, while others vowed to replant mangroves that stabilized the fragile coastline. These changes might test their resolve, but the fear of hurricanes that would level entire neighborhoods drove them to work harder each day. Meanwhile, Jean rose before dawn on a morning when the skies were peach and violet. He walked alone to the seashore with the conch shell. The tide was low, revealing the secret patterns of rippling sand. He could feel the hush of the ocean, as though it awaited his next move. Kneeling in the wet sand, he pressed the conch to his lips and blew. The sound echoed across the water, merging with the sigh of the breeze. The first rays of sunlight skittered across the waves. He sensed something listening in that moment, a presence as old as time, measuring the sincerity of those who lived by the coast. Beyond the horizon, clouds that had once gathered thickly began to disperse. Jean felt an answer in the shift of the tides, the gentle swell of droplets that lapped against his ankles. Though no one else could see the Coral Queen at that moment, Jean knew she was there. In his thoughts, he heard the faint melody that had beckoned him under the sea, a promise that if the village stayed true to its new commitment, nature would once again find equilibrium. Weeks passed, and while storms continued to form in distant waters, the monstrous hurricanes that had battered their region receded. Rain occasionally fell, but in more measured ways, feeding the crops rather than destroying them. Some villagers, who had once mocked the notion of a mermaid's wrath, found themselves kneeling at the water's edge, offering thanks with small tokens, a handful of seeds, a prayer, a vow to safeguard the beaches for future generations. In the lull of calmer weather, fishing improved, and even legendary fish rarely seen since Augustine's youth ventured closer to shore, as if drawn to newly revitalized reefs. Jean's life, too, underwent a quiet transformation. He repaired his boat, focusing on sustainable fishing techniques, even guiding younger fishermen to avoid overharvesting. At night, over steaming plantain stew, his children asked him to recount the story of the Coral Queen. With each telling, he emphasized not the terror of storms, but the grace of a spirit determined to protect her domain. Word spread to nearby villages, and soon others began implementing similar protections for their waters, offering the Coral Queen small gifts of respect and cleaning their shores with renewed vigilance. In time, Augustin passed peacefully in his sleep, content to see the legends he had cherished realized through actions rather than dismissed as fantasies. On the evening of his memorial, villagers gathered at the beach, lit candles in coconut shells, and placed them on the water's surface. The subtle glow drifted into the surf, bobbing like stars that had fallen into the sea. At that moment, a distant shimmer beneath the waves rippled out toward the candles, guiding their gentle path away from shore, as if in a final tribute. For many who watched, it felt like a blessing from beneath. Though no one could say if the Coral Queen would ever walk among them in human form, her influence remained a tangible presence. In the hush that follows each twilight, the villagers still sense her gaze. Some evenings, fishermen spot a faint luminescence weaving through the coral heads, a quiet sign that she still patrols her kingdom. Now, rather than trembling before the storms, the people watch the horizon with respect. They know hurricanes will still come, but they pray such fury will never again be fueled by neglect and disregard. In the hush of the night, Jean sometimes slips into the water near the reef, letting the gentle waves guide him. He can still picture the transformation of the underwater temple, no longer shrouded in gloom, but gradually regaining the thriving brilliance it once held. Although he has not revisited the coral sanctuary the way he did that fateful day, he feels it each time a fish glides past his ankles or a swirl of seagrass brushes against him. The ocean is alive with memory, and its caretaker, the Coral Queen, remains ever watchful. So, the sea and shore forge a renewed pact, a living promise that endures in every offering of gratitude, every coral fragment replanted, and every child's wide-eyed wonder at the whispered stories passed down by the flames in the hearth. This balance is delicate, held together by the daily choices of the villagers. Yet, as the winds blow in from distant lands and the melody of waves rises and falls, a chorus of hope resonates along the coast. It is an echo of the Coral Queen's silent refrain. The sea provides, and humankind must give back in equal measure, protecting both life and legend for generations yet to come.